Next on the PowerPLAY show, Amanda Smerage and I sit down and chop it up, one female director to the other, about our careers, our obstacles, and the one moment we are most proud of. My conversation with broadcast director Amanda Smerage, next on the PowerPLAY show.
From the studios at Hull Bay Productions, this is the PowerPLAY.
Welcome to the PowerPLAY show. I'm your host, Tonya McGrath. Live shots, cue playbacks, key chyron, dissolve, wipe, fade to black. These are all the words that make up the language of a director of live and live-to-tape productions, and we'll get into what all these mean in a bit. In a male-dominated industry, particularly when it comes to production crews, knowing this language and effectively executing a broadcast, it can be very, very stressful. The level of skill required to take this on is immense, especially if you're a woman. My guest today knows all about this and has a story to share. Amanda Smerage is the director of broadcast production for the Worcester Red Sox. She is a dynamic, multi-Emmy award-winning television production specialist with 20 years in the field. Adept at both live and post-production broadcasts, Amanda has worked as a lead EVS operator and replay specialist and is also a skilled editor, technical director, and replay producer. Leveraging an impressive body of work and expansive knowledge base, Amanda has changed the game in TV production, standing out firmly on her technical expertise and command for authority in one of the most anxiety and male-driven industries. And I know it is what Amanda and I have in common, and we're here to discuss how we got here and why there are so few of us calling the shots. Amanda, welcome to the PowerPLAY.
Thank you so much, Tonya.
I was searching on LinkedIn as I typically do, and your story came up, and I said, I have got to talk to this lady. Tell me how well, first of all, let's talk about what you're doing now, and then I want to go back and we can just kind of like unpack the stories, nightmares, everything.
Yeah, all of them, right? Right now's a really exciting time. The AAA affiliate of the Boston Red Sox, which had been known as the Paw Sox up until 2019, they moved from Rhode Island to Worcester, and in that span of time, and started building a brand new stadium, a production facility, and there's been a lot of excitement around the team there. Cue a pandemic. So in 2020, there was no minor league baseball. I mean, we hardly had a major league season, right? There was like 50 games or something like that, 60 games. I'm not really sure exactly how many. But it sort of gave this minor league affiliation time to regroup and sort of rebrand themselves. They're fully encapsulated within the MLB network now. So Worcester inherited a brand new team, created a brand new ballpark, and basically decided that they were going to be the first AAA baseball affiliation to broadcast every single one of their home games on a cable television platform, which in our area is NESN. NESN and NESN Plus is a great outlet. Obviously, they are owners of the Red Sox are part owners of the NESN company. So it was a really easy match to be made. That being said, what the Woo Sox decided to do was to do all the production in-house and not have NESN production crews come in and broadcast the game. We completely package and provide a fully encapsulated broadcast for them instead of having their crews come and do our shows. Right. Which is an endeavor. We're basically launching a brand new product, which has been a really fulfilling experience.
And heavily stressful. Yeah. Have you always been a sports
heavily
enthusiast?
Stressful.
Yeah.
I have. I've been in this world for a long time, but it really started as a kid. My grandparents had season tickets to the Bruins and the Celtics when I was a kid, and going to the old Garden and watching the games there and seeing, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, like that whole era of sports. It's such a huge time in Boston sports history. It was amazing to watch and amazing to be there for. And I think sort of what drew me to this is being able to give that experience to people at home that aren't able to go to those games. Really bring people into the atmosphere and the feeling of being at a live event.
So let's talk about how you got into this crazy business. I know when my mom was a television producer, and the first job I had after college, the ad agency ended up getting sold, and I didn't think I wanted to go into television business, but there was a entry-level position that was opening up. She's like, you should apply. And she's like, but do me a favor, don't ever go into television. Just do this until you can find your next job. And then 25 years later, I left. How did you do this? I'd say it started when I was still in high school. There was a small video production class at my very small high school. And we did some of like the high school football games for what was then Cablevision. So I grew up in Hamilton, Massachusetts, and we put them on like the local Channel 3 Continental Cablevision. And I remember like standing on top of a van, like running a camera, and it was so much fun, right? Like it didn't feel like work. It hardly is, right? You're getting to enjoy a game. You get to see the best parts of it. You get the best seat in the house. And when I went to college, I, kept up with a, film and television major. I didn't think I was going into a sports route. I wanted to move to LA and be a film editor and, be in Hollywood, right? Like it's glossy and shiny and all the things that sports broadcasts aren't. But it didn't work out that way. They say it's, who you know, where you are more than like what you know in a lot of these positions. Yep.
And I had a professor that when Gillette Stadium was being built, he was like, hey, I know the guys over there. You want to earn a couple extra bucks from running cable for the stadium? And sure. Why not? It's 1999, 2000. The Patriots are not anything, great at that point. And it's sort of we're building a new stadium. I'm on my hands and knees pulling cable through like muddy troughs. And one of the guys there said, hey, we're putting in this new piece of equipment. Do you want to learn it? And I looked at yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me learn something that is not pulling cable through trenches, right?
Right.
And that was a piece of equipment that had debuted in the Atlanta Olympics. It's called the EVS system. It's a digital replay system that is still, the industry standard today. It's what I've been using since I started in this business. To do all my live editing during broadcast. It's the on-the-fly editing machine. It's super powerful, and it basically paved a career path for me.
And at that time, as you look around the people who were around you, how many women did you see?
At that point, it was not very many. Specifically as a replay operator, which is what I was sort of aspiring to be at that point, there were actually two that were in those roles at that time. Lorna Luke and Sherry Day were their names, one from New Hampshire, one from Rhode Island. And other than that, it was not a lot of women. It was the two of them that I, sort of could look up to, and they worked on the Red Sox games and they worked on the Bruins games, and they did all these bigger shows. And I was, doing Jumbotron shows for, Gillette Stadium, which is still, I look at it now and I say, oh, I was only doing Jumbotron shows. But that was the Patriots team that went on to win the Super Bowl. That was the year that Drew Bledsoe got hurt and Tom Brady took over.
That's right. That's right.
I think, I look back on it now and what an amazing piece of history to be a part of. But then it was like, how do I get out of here and move on to something more? Just very ambitiously driven for that next step.
When you think about that time and, wanting to move into that next step, did you know that you wanted to stay in the, the technical end of production? Were there other aspirations that you had? I know you said you wanted to go to Hollywood, but once you kind of got that bug, I call it, what made you want to just kind of stick with it?
I was good at it. You know what I mean? Like, it was something that came easy. It wasn't, and it was rewarding because it was instant gratification for what you were doing. You could, especially in the Jumbotron world at that point, you'd put a replay up on that Jumbotron and you could hear the crowd, right? You could hear the crowd in the stadium respond to exactly what you were doing. And that's a pretty cool feeling to get. Like, I don't know that there's a lot of people that can say that they get a real-time response to an action that they were doing, right? It's musicians, it's athletes, it's, actors on stage, right. Things like that. There's not a lot of people that work in a real-time feedback loop. And it was exciting to do that and to know that, you'd look at your cameras afterwards and you'd see the players watching the replays as well. They were looking to see, like, did I get that first down? Should we challenge this? Those are really kind of cool feedback responses. And it was enjoyable. And the people that I worked with were fun to be around. It was definitely, they say, like, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. If you love the people around you, though, they just make it fun to be here. And that was a huge part of it. The people that I worked with were such a big part of the enjoyment level at work. It never felt like work to me. It still hardly ever feels like work to me.
Yeah.
Which is great.
I know what you mean. I surrounded myself with just some of the best folks in television. And as I started kind of moving up the ranks, so I started as a PA, and then I was kind of on the producer track. And I remember it got to a point where I had went out and I had field produced this story, and then I was going to hand it off to a male editor to put it together. And I kind of thought, like, well, why can't I put it together? Why can't I do that? And I literally went into WGBH on weekends at nights, and this is when we had linear editing, so it was tape to tape, ABC rolls, all the good stuff. And I picked it up, and like you said, it was really easy for me, that it almost kind of frightened me. I almost had like this sense of like, oh my gosh, I have this magic power because I could learn how to do this.
And doing it linearly was not simple. It was a lot of work in that. And, I look at it now and I'm so glad that even though this digital equipment was there, this nonlinear equipment was there when I started, it was not in a lot of broadcast trucks. We were still doing Betacam replays off of, DNF machines and building pop reels of like, here's all your highlights, and you'd hit a commercial break and slam this tape out of this deck and add this pop reel. And now you're going to 7 minutes in because that's where the feature starts, but you're at 3 minutes and you have 13 seconds to get there. Yeah. And it was high stress.
Yeah.
But it's also like high reward. It's that sort of the adrenaline rush you get of like, you finish it and you're just like, we did it, you know,
until the next break.
Until the next break. And then until the next break. And then, oh my gosh, there was a goal that happened that we have to go back for before we go to break. And are we going to be able to get back far enough? And it was a time management issue too. You have these 90-minute tapes, and a game is going to be much longer than that. And you have to keep going back and recording over things and making sure you're not recording over anything that might be important.
Right.
Later down the road, imagine if, you see, Bobby Orr's goal. If they don't manage that reel correctly, that gets completely wiped out. There's no digital archive system at that point. There's no digital archive system of, the early Pedro Martinez years, the Nomar Garcia-Parra years. It's just not, it's not there. And it was, that sort of a responsibility that I didn't realize that we had in this business until much later. I knew I was doing it, but it didn't click to me what I was doing. I wasn't thinking about the long term of it. It was it was so momentary. And then you look at it and you're like, oh wow, I see now they go on these, ESPN, like, down the years, and you're like, oh, wow, I was at that game. That was my replay.
Yeah.
I remember that,
That's awesome. As you started to kind of like move up the ranks and into, positions where you were actually calling the shots and, telling people what to do and working with, supervising a crew and directing these shows. What was that like for you? I know that I had, my crew was predominantly male. I had a couple of women. One was audio. And the other woman was, I think she was playback. I'm trying to remember. And we probably know a lot of the same people, but I would always kind of refer to myself as like, here I come, the little black girl in the big chair, and, let's go. And what was that like for you? Just kind of like, starting to really take your place in this position.
So I kind of feel that it was an interesting progression for me. When I started in this business, I was very young. Most of the people I was working with were, 10, 12, 15, 20 years older than I was. And I don't know that I ever felt like there was a definition of like, oh, here comes a woman coming in to do this. But I definitely got a lot of, oh, the new kids are taking over. And at first it was sort of like, oh, haha, yep, I'm young, I'm doing this. But then, 15 years into my career, I'm still hearing, oh, the new kids are taking over. And I was like, man, I have been around. I have done these shows with you. I have been there, Yeah. I've bailed you out. You've bailed me out. We're equal. And I still, I'm not sure that I feel like I always get that back. As much as I would say, like, I put myself on par with all these people, not just technical acumen or, your right to be there, things like that. I'm good at this. I would happily say, call any of these people. I can't be there for a day. These are people I would call and replace myself with without any hesitation. And I think it took me a long time to feel like that was reciprocal. That a lot of the time I felt like I was being told, oh, well, you're just the young kid coming in, like, come in, do your job. Ha ha ha, it's really cute. And it took a while to sort of move past that. And, this career is sort of, like, brutal's the wrong word. I mean, it's tough. It's high stress.
Very tough.
It's high laughs too. And it definitely had like a frat house mentality when I was much younger. And I think there was a lot of like, go along to get along. So sort of like, instead of becoming the joke, laugh at the joke. And I've talked to a lot of women that I work with now, and all of us that are in the same, generation sort of say the same thing. We're all like, oh yeah, we were just part of the boys club. Producers would say, oh, haha, sorry, I forgot there was a woman on the crew, after an off-color joke or things like that. And that happens far, far less now. We're obviously in a different era. Right. And a lot of the younger women moving up into these ranks now are much more outspoken about things that I would have kept my mouth shut about, which I think is great. Because I think there needed to be a little bit of accountability there, and there needed to be sort of a growing up of the profession. But it's definitely, I just sort of, when I went in, I just went in and did my job. And if anyone had anything to say about it, like, come tell me. Because if you feel like you can do it better, here, do it better.
Right.
Like, that's sort of my feeling. Like, I'm here for a reason. And if you feel like you can do it better, prove to me that you can do it better.
How did you handle, or I should say manage, emotions? As we've talked about, it's a very high intense field. And when you're counting down to live and you're live, it's like 60 minutes, 90 minutes, however long the production is, and you have to stay at this level. And sometimes things happen, the wrong tape gets cued, microphones get batteries.
Oh my God, did you watch my first broadcast? 'Cause that's exactly what all the microphones, just like, we worked on these, they all worked, and now they don't. And why? How does that even happen?
Right.
I mean, right now, so this is sort of an interesting time for me. Directing these baseball games is the first time I've directed for broadcast. I've done some jumbotron, some college stuff, things like that. But these are the first games that I have sat in the director's chair and called the shots. And I'm 10 games into it at this point. We start another homestand this week. And it just, once you start, it just keeps snowballing. And I'm working with a very young crew of a lot of interns and college kids, people that have never made television before, which is a different place for me because I've been in it, and I've dealt with the producers that yell, the producers that joke, the producers that say, inappropriate things. I've dealt with all those things. And that's not who I want to be. I want to make sure that people around me are being given the opportunity to do their best. But it is high stress, and I've definitely caught myself being like, calm down, like, take a breath. Everybody take a breath. Like, okay, so this didn't work. Next time, let's try it this way. And that's a really hard thing to do, I think, live, because your emotions can get so caught up with you. Mm-hmm. And I'm actively every day working at being the type of person that I would want to have on the other end if I was sitting in that chair. Because I've had people that run the gamut. I've been yelled at. I've been spoken down to. I've been, told I would never work in this business again, all things like that.
Right. And
it's never over anything that is going to change someone's life. And it's never over, we're not saving lives here. We're not putting a man on the moon. We're doing this entertainment.
Preach, Amanda.
and if we don't have the replay at the exact time, is it going to hurt anyone? No, probably not. Somebody's ego, maybe, right? But we're not doing anything that is going to save the world. We're entertaining people, and if the people at home don't know that anything's wrong, there's no reason to get completely out of sorts about it on the production end.
Right.
And I'm trying to work hard at making sure that I embody that as well, which is harder than I expected, honestly.
It is, because the directors have to set the tone, and they set the tone for the production, but they also set the tone for those who are working on the production. So if they see you out of control, they're going to feel out of control.
Right.
So and I remember just always, before I went down to the control room, I'm like, okay, this is good. We're going to do this, whatever, put on a happy face, no matter what kind of day I was having, because they feed off of us.
Yeah.
And so if we're chaotic, and there were times like, I had folks that didn't particularly like me, and I'm pretty sure you've dealt with this too. And they go out of their way. I won't say sabotage, but they would go out of their way to make things difficult in a time where it was already high stress, high level, performance. And I'd have to just smile and say, okay, well, we're gonna work on this, when we're done, when we fade to black, and we're clear, we're gonna deal with this. And I wonder, how do you manage those kind of situations? And hopefully they were few and far between, but I can imagine that it was, just really kind of having to swallow a lot for the
I mean, I think that's definitely a part of it. I think sort of the saving grace in my world is that we're doing a live event. Even like it's even different from like the news side of things, because the news keeps getting repeated, right? Like you do your 6 o'clock news, and then you do maybe your 7 o'clock, and then your 10 o'clock, and your 11, and maybe the story changes a little bit. Maybe they throw to it a different way. There's a different lead. There's new information. But in sports, we prep for, call it 6 hours before a game, and then 7:05. We come up at 7, puck drops at 7:05 or something like that. And we are on for 2.5 hours straight. And then as soon as we fade to black, we're done. We walk away. We don't take that home with us. Which, it's both a blessing and a curse, right? From the technician standpoint, if you're a contractor that's sitting in a chair and helping put this broadcast on, you walk away and you say, well, that was a great show. Like everything felt good. I didn't get yelled at, which shouldn't be like the first thing, but like I didn't screw up on air. I didn't do this. And that's great. But if it didn't go awesome, if there was like, if you're like, oh man, I had a bad cue point there. Like I rewound on air. I did this, like I got yelled at. You're still walking away 2.5 hours later and you're not revisiting that show.
Right.
You meet that production crew again the very next day. But for the most part, it's going to be, you're going to walk in fresh. You're going to start over and you're going to say, okay, that was yesterday. We have a brand new show today. We have a whole nother 2.5 hours to do it again and do it better. And that's sort of the mentality that I've always taken with it. You walk away at the end of the night and you don't bring your work home with you. Transitioning into the director role is different because now I am bringing that work home with me. I'm the one that is putting it together and working with the talent and making sure that everything is going right. And helping the people in the roles that I held before get better at their jobs, because this is their first time doing broadcast television. Some of them have never sat down at the machines they're using before. We have our A1 who had never mixed a live show before we went on air with our opening day.
Oh.
Yeah. We had, our replay operator had never sat down at the machine before this season started. Mm-hmm. Camera operators that have never been at these positions. And do I kind of wish we had like a week or two before we actually had our opening, like a soft opener beforehand? Yeah, that would have been great. But we came up on, May 11th with an hour pregame ceremony with the opening of Polar Park in Worcester. And then the game, we came right up on Nesson at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, to the entire region, without any rehearsal, without any, without a lot of these people having done these roles before. And there was a lot of, hey, that was great this time. Next time, let's try it this way. Mm-hmm. And trying to make sure that people are doing their best at jobs that they are still learning, and putting out a product to be proud of at the same time. And it's gotten steadily better across each ensuing game. People are finding their rhythms and learning how this all works. And I'd like to say that, by the end of this season, these guys I would put money that any of these people in these positions could go out and they could do a contract job for, Nathan or whoever, if they're like, hey, we need a camera guy and we're really thin. And I really hope that by the end of the season, I could say, hey, this kid worked with me in Worcester. I'd be happy to recommend him for this.
Right.
Or her, or, whoever it is. I want these people that are working with me to be, to want to do that and to aspire to be at that level. Because it is a fun career, no matter how, stressful and hard it can be. It's rewarding at the same time.
I started at WGBH in 1990. I'm a little older than you are, and I took over directing in 1998 and did it for 20 years. I didn't have any female role models. All the women that were around me were producers, were talent, were managers, but really no one that knew how to do what I knew how to do and could give me, a lot of guys, and the guys were great, and they would give me their feedback, and sometimes it was appropriate, and sometimes it wasn't appropriate because it was like in the middle of a production, but whatever.
Yeah.
How was it for you being in this field and not having these women role models to kind of just be able to just shoot the crap with and just say, hey, help me with this?
Yeah. I think it was different. I definitely, most of the people that I looked up to and, emulated my career after were men. There were a handful of women technicians. And it honestly wasn't until about a year and a half, 2 years ago that I started thinking about reaching further, going, crossing the line from the technician to the production side. And there were female directors and producers that I had in my, path as I moved this way. Rose Merakian Wheeler is the director for the Bruins. She has been for over 25 years. And she has been there the whole time that I've worked on any Bruins broadcast. Lisa Stelzer is another director. She's out on the West Coast. She did a lot of the Anaheim Ducks and things like that. And they were both people that I worked with on a regular basis. And, that was definitely nice to see that there were people in the production side of things. The technical side of things was woefully short on women. And it wasn't really until I left the Boston market to work nationally that I crossed paths with many more women that are in my profession that I've become close with and that I see on a regular basis doing the same things that I do and being able to, talk to them about how to mitigate some of these, dicey waters that we sort of go in for work. And I would say, I just came back from a show where, there were 6 women replay operators on it out of 30, 40, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And that was a high rate. That's a high ratio. And it's been nice to see that there are more and more women in these roles. We have 2 women technical directors on CBS football, which is the package that I do. And that's amazing. And they are at the top of their game, right? They're TDing at the Super Bowl, at the Masters, at things like this, which is great to see. There's a female technical director in Boston now, Michelle Schlickman, and she does a lot of the Red Sox games and Bruins games, Celtics games. So now I do see many, many more women in these roles. And it's really amazing to see, because when I started, there weren't, there'd be maybe one other woman on the crew. And, there weren't a lot of people to sit down and talk about like, oh, well, the guys are having this conversation and it's a little off color. And, they like, do I say something? Do I not? Do I just sort of sit here and blend into the wall and just sort of hope they forget that I'm here? Do I speak up and then put my career in jeopardy? Do I not? How do you mitigate those things? And especially as a young woman, I came into this when I was still a teenager. Those are things that I wrestled with a lot. And I think, back then I just sort of took the role of, I'm just going to, sit here, shut up and mind my own business.
Yeah. Yeah. Same, because the alternative, as you mentioned, could be losing your job, ostracizing, having a crew that doesn't trust you, because we know that that's also, Well,
and then, you don't want anything to be misconstrued. If you are, good friends with someone or whatever, it does, now it's very, very different, but, like go out for a beer after a game or something like that. And, you don't want to be the last person to leave the bar with like one other coworker there, because you don't know what someone's going to say, even if it's the most, it's just 2 friends having a drink. You never know what was going to be said back then. Right. I mean, and I guess that still holds true today, right? I'm much more confident in myself at this point and, would shut any rumors down very quickly. Whereas back then it was just like, well, these guys don't know me. They don't know what I'm doing. And the whole trope of like a woman sleeping her way to the top is something that does run rampant through this business.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I was accused with sleeping with at least 30 people at my job, but it was just you're standing off to the side, maybe somewhere, and talking to one person, and and it just gets misconstrued, and that's what happens. And like you said, it was really the culture back then, and I don't think I let that part bother me, but it was, as you mentioned, it was the idea that I'm only here because I may have slept with XYZ. And and that was tough. And I would never let him see me sweat, but then I get in my car on my way home and I'm just like bawling, like, what the hell do I have to do to prove that I belong here?
Exactly. Because and certainly there are people that find their way into these positions that way. There are more people that find their way into these because they are good at what they do, and they elevate themselves through the ranks by proving their worth and proving that they are good at this and have the right demeanor to be in these roles. And that's really the fact that those two things get conflated is the more disturbing bit to me, because there's, as far as I'm concerned, and there's been a lot of obviously this is the Me Too generation, and between people getting roles with the way that hiring practices are now, like, I don't ever want to find myself in a position because I'm a woman. I want to find myself in a position because I'm good at what I'm doing. And I don't ever want to feel like the people around me think I'm only in my position because I'm a woman. Because I don't think that commandeers any respect. And I think that especially as I'm crossing this line into a production role, I need to have the respect of the people around me to make that work. Because as the producer or director, your word is the final say. Like, that's what happens. And if you don't have the respect of the people around you, and they don't trust what you're saying, or they think that you're not suited for that job, you're not going to put out a good product. And, my biggest concern is putting out a good product. I want a product that everyone involved can be proud of.
What would you say to young women who are aspiring to be on the technical end of productions, and even, aspiring to be directors, TDs? What would you say to young women now?
I mean, like you were saying that your mom said, my first gut response would be, get out of TV. I mean, I hate to say it, and it's so trite.
Don't do it.
Honestly,
don't do it.
Don't do it, because you're never going to find anything that gives you the reward for what we're doing here, like, in the same way. Because once you're in, you're sucked in.
Yes.
Like, I don't know people that have left this business successfully. Even people who retire, they come back, right? Like, I don't know people that have successfully left this business and really left it. Like, once you're in, you're in. It's like this strange cult of technology and entertainment and all these things. And I think it is because it's fun, right? Like, so I think that would be the number one thing. Like, remember that this is supposed to be fun. Like, you could have a job digging ditches. You could be in an office all day. You could be typing at a computer. You could be doing all these things that are not fun. And this should be fun. So if you're not having fun, figure out why, and figure out what it is that's holding you back from that. And to trust in your abilities. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough to be here, because if you've made it this far, that you're in and you have a foot in that door, you're good enough to be here. Trust it, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And if you mess up, you mess up. You have another show tomorrow. It's not the end of the world. Everybody does it, and you can't let anyone tell you that they've had a perfect career, because it's absolutely not the truth.
No, absolutely not. What would you say is, and I'm going to share mine afterwards, what would you say is your proudest moment in your career?
If you asked me like a month and a half, 2 months ago, I probably would have said the first time I was called to work at the Olympics. It was something that I never dreamed about. And it was something that it hadn't clicked in my head that this was a pathway to go and do such a huge stage. But at this point, honestly, this launch of the play baseball in Worcester has been so difficult and so rewarding at the same time, that I'm so proud of what we were able to do to get this on air, looking like a real broadcast. It did not look like it was, two JVC cameras and somebody's dad out in the outfield. It looked like baseball. It sounded like baseball, and it looked like something that if you turned on Nesson and you'd be like, oh, look, it's a baseball game. It was, and the people put in so much time and effort and so much of their heart to get it to that point. And then the man hours that the staff has put in to get there. It made me so proud to see it at the end of it, after the final out. I just sort of sat back and I was like, now I can enjoy it. And it really was it was such a good feeling, because I sort of set my goal, probably December 2019. I had started talking to a friend of mine and I was like, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to move up into directing. And I started putting out feelers and started doing some interviews at the college level to do some of that. And then the pandemic hit and I was like, well, I guess we're out of work for a little while. Let me go all in on this. And I spent the last year and a half cultivating a reel and my resume and just applying for everything that was out there. And I, interviewed for multitudes of positions, and it kept being like, we love you in this position, but you just don't have the above the line experience. And it was over and over and over again, you're such an interesting candidate for this, but, and when this one came up in Worcester, I was like, well, this is my backyard. It's and I am, I know baseball, I've done baseball forever. And I was like, well, let me throw my hat in the ring for this. And it was the perfect storm of everything coming together. And a year and a half of hard work that it finally, it came to fruition, in May 11th, was our opening day. And it was I didn't even have to get nervous about it. It was, I was balls to the wall for chewing up to it. And all of a sudden I sat down in the chair and I was like, all right, we are 90 seconds to air. And I didn't even have time to get nervous. I didn't have time to even think about what I was about to say next. It just happened. And it happened so organically and naturally that I was just like, this is incredible. I love this.
Yeah. Yeah. My proudest moment, which happened before I was able to leave GBH, and I was telling the production supervisors that I was wanting to make this happen, was I wanted an all-female crew on just one show.
Yeah.
And so Jennifer Reardon was my TD, Judy Richardson was on tape, Kate Conklin was my audio, Kathy Gleason was my LD and prompter operator. Then I had Kathy Gleason, Lynn Skornavaca, and I'm missing somebody right now. But anyways, all female crew. And it was just something that GBH hadn't done. And and shout out to Terry Quinn, who made this all happen, because she was the production supervisor at the time. I said, let's just do it. Let's just, let the boys go do something else. Let's just do it. And it was, I think for all of us, it was just really, a wow moment. And I don't think we really truly appreciated it until many years later, because it hasn't happened for any of these women since. So that was mine, and it was just such a lot of fun, and we kept saying,
awesome.
Yeah.
The very last show that I did before we shut down last March was on International Women's Day, and NBC put together an all-female crew for the St. Louis Blues Chicago Blackhawks game on NBC proper. And we had Kate Scott as our play-by-play, AJ Malesko and Kendall Coyne as our analysts. It was one of the first times that a female has done play-by-play for hockey in the US. And Kate was fabulous. We had a female producer, female director, female ADs, graphics operators, tape operators, camera operators. And the thing that we pressing about this was that this shouldn't be an anomaly, right? It shouldn't be something that we have to strive to put together, because these are all women that are very accomplished in their individual roles, and they do these roles on a daily basis. But the fact that you have to consciously work to make an entire crew come together, that's not just something that would happen, right? Like, because how many times has there been an all-male crew put together without anyone even thinking about it, right? That just happens.
Right.
So what we kept trying to stress, because in the sports world, it is few and far between with the amount of women that we have on these crews. And when they pitched this to us, I was like, oh yeah, that would be cool, but I don't want to be trotted out for show. Like, this is my job. This is my career. I don't want you making a mockery of it by saying, look at this novelty that we're trotting out for International Women's Day. How do we make sure that these women aren't being thought of as like a gimmick, right? Because it's not a gimmick. These are our careers. And when they started doing press releases about it and media circuits. And it was one of those things that it was hard to feel good about it when it started feeling gimmicky. Because there shouldn't be, like, why does there need to be such a celebration of this if this is just your career?
Right.
We shouldn't need to do that at this point. It's 2021. Like, we should be able to field crews that are equally male and female and, very diverse, without having to stop and scratch our heads and say, oh, well, who can we put in this position?
Right.
And that's, I hope that, I see a day that we aren't scratching our heads to do that it's just, you show up and like, here's 6 women on camera, just because they are the 6 most qualified people in this region. Not because they're women, but because they are the most qualified to be there. And that's something that I would love to see happen.
The Power Play typically ends with asking our guests kind of like 3 lightning questions. And my first, if it weren't production, what field do you think you would have gone into?
Cooking.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a good chef?
I love doing it. It's a lot of fun for me. I've had some kitchen failures for sure, but for the most part, I think things come out pretty okay. But yeah, I love it. It's enjoyable for me.
Second question, who are some of your professional and personal mentors?
Wow. Professionally, I would have to say, there's so many. Like, I have worked with so many people that have been so absolutely inspiring to me. Lisa Seltzer, I've mentioned her before. She is a absolute groundbreaker in the broadcast world. She was directing before there were other females in that role. And she's opened so many doors for so many people that's just amazing to see. Personally, my parents are the strongest I've ever met. Just from overcoming adversity for a long time. My mom has a terminal illness that, grew up with. And the fact that her drive and her ambition to, keep going and just be strong is definitely something that I admire really, really greatly. And there's just professionally, there's too many to list. I've been so blessed to have really, really strong and wonderful people to look up to in this career.
And finally, what would Amanda tell her teenage self? What one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, I think I would say that not to hesitate on making the professional leaps. I think I was probably ready to make this change to the production side 10 years ago. And I sort of stayed in my comfort zone. So I would say, stretch past that comfort zone, take the scarier road. Because if it doesn't work out, there are things to fall back on. Taking that leap and failing doesn't mean that you're ending your career. Because if you take that leap and you fail, you still have what you're doing now to come back to. You're not going to be starting over at the bottom. There's like a video game, right? Like you have that, extra life that you already made it to. You're not going back to round one. You're gonna fall back to where you're at now. So why not make that leap and try for that next step?
Amanda Smerage, thank you so much for this great conversation and sharing your powerful story. And I hope it inspires some future female directors to take their place in the big chair. Thank you again for being here, and continue success.
So much.
And I can't wait to watch your games. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. Absolutely.
Remember, you can listen to past episodes of the PowerPLAY show wherever you subscribe to podcasts, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, and now Pandora Podcasts. You can also watch our interviews on YouTube. Simply search the Whole Bay Productions Media channel and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And always, we air on BroncoEyeRadio.com each Saturday at 5 p.m. So be sure to tune in to the PowerPLAY show on Thursdays for a new episode wherever you subscribe to podcasts or on our YouTube channel at Whole Bay Productions Media channel, or simply visit thepowerplayshow.com. As many of you have heard, I am in development of my second film, More Than Our Skin. Here is a quick trailer of what the film is all about.
Without my makeup, I would never open my front door for fear of what my neighbors would see and what they would say.
It doesn't look that bad. Really?
I just want you to see me for who I am, not what I look like.
For most people, vitiligo is unknown because most people will never have to live with it. We see them and we think, what's wrong with her? Or worse, even feel, I hope she doesn't touch me.
For years, I struggled with self-acceptance and the effect others perceived of me.
What's wrong with her? Is she white? Can I catch it?
It's the voices behind these beautiful faces that tell the real story of what it's like living with vitiligo. From depression to worse, suicide. It's the pain of looking and feeling different from a disease with no cure and very little advocacy.
It's important that our stories be told.
That our truth be shared.
And our voices be heard.
We invite you to become a part of our lives for just a moment, so that you can understand that what we look like, that has never defined who we are.
More Than Our Skin will sound the alarm to the silent tears, unveil the masks of the forced smiles in the face of ignorance and hate, and will hopefully allow you, the viewer, to see through their eyes the pain, the journey, the strength, and the pride, knowing it's
More!
More.
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 More than our skin.
If you so inclined, please visit morethanourskin.org and learn more about the film, the incredible stories we will share, and leave a donation to help the making of this film. $5 or whatever you have. Every donation makes a difference. Until next time, I'm Tonya McGrath. Be well, cue music, and fade to black.